Take a moment to look at the graph to the side of me and think how you would create this. Not just the scatter plot, but also the fact that there is a region of the graph where there's two data sets that overlap, a cluster of points, that's been highlighted by drawing an ellipse over those points or around those points, and also the total number of points is shown. I bet what a lot of you would do is make the scatter plot in one program, hopefully DataGraph, and then add those annotations in another program like a PowerPoint or an Illustrator. I want to show you how to do this all within DataGraph and also have it be very dynamic. So we're going to create 3 different graphs today. These are all in a new online example that you can get from DataGraph. The first one that we're going to make is this one that you see here, where we have this set of points, and I'm actually using the region command to clip which points that you're seeing. So here's the entire set, and I can move this region around, but notice that when I have this clipped, as I move the region, it will change which points you see. Now, the other thing that's really cool about the region command that we were very careful to do is to make sure that the points that are within a region stay the same, even if you change the aspect ratio. So again, this is not just a shape drawn over an image. This shape is part of your data. So this got us thinking, and we added into DataGraph version 5.2 the ability to then find out and connect what points are within that region to the rows that are in your data table. And that's what the second graph that I'm going to show you will do. And in this graphic, we're going to be able to count the number of points that are within our region. The ones on the outside, I added labels just for good measure. And notice again that as I move this command around, it changes how the points are shown. It's also changing my count because I've moved the region and changed the number of points that are within that region. So I'll show you how to create that. And the last one that we're going to do is the one that I started with, where again, we have these 2 sets of data that are overlapping, and I'll show you how to add a region command to count the points that are within both of them together. Here's the example file that I got from the online examples, and what I did was I pulled the data out of this and made a blank file, well, not entirely blank because it has the data, but I'm going to use this to build each of these 3 graphs that we talked about. What this file has are some columns that are randomly generated data. This is using the nrand function, and this is connected to a variable that has a slider which can change the number of points that are generated. Okay, so to make the first graph, the first thing I want to do is I want to highlight my 2 columns. So I'll go ahead and hold the Shift key and select both of these column headers. And there's 3 things that we're going to add along the toolbar. First, I'll add a points command. Then I'm going to add, using the label menu here, the region command. And then I'm also going to go over here and click on the group icon. So the group icon is really what allows us to do this clip with functionality. So to start, I'm going to drag this points command into this command group. And all I need to do is to now select what I'm going to clip this with. You can use the menu, or you can actually just click on the icon of this region command, drag it and drop it right onto the points. And now we see, this is basically what I showed you before, except for I just don't have a fill in my region command. If you want to add a fill, you can expand this. You see that there's an option right here that says fill. Currently says nothing. We're going to change this to a solid color, for example. And now this pretty much looks like the one that's in the example file. The next graph that we're going to create is the one that you see here, where we're actually counting the number of points in the region. And if I just go back for a moment into the example file, what you see here is there's a column that is a mask column. And in this column, we have either a 1 or a 0 for every row of data. 1 means that the point is in the region. 0 means that this XY point is not in the region. So that's what I'm going to show you how to create. Let's go into the file that we've been working with, add a new graph, and I'll just go ahead and do the same thing that I did before, select my data, add my points. We can add another region command. I'm not going to use the clip with, so we'll just have these 2 here. And what I want to do is, or what I want you to do is expand open this region command And what you'll see is this new option called Mask For. This is what we did not used to have in DataGraph. This is just in DataGraph 5.2. And this is a menu where you can select a command. Nothing's going to change in the graph when I do this. But what this allows me to do is to extract a column that will give me these ones and zeros for every row, letting me know, is it in this region or out of this region? Click Extract, and that's what is going to create this mask column here for you. And now that I have this mask column, I can do all sorts of things with it. For example, if I want to count the number of points that are in the region, you can right-click or control-click on this mask column, select Number from Column, and just sum up the values. Again, it's just a number 1 if it's in the region, 0 if it's out of the region. So a simple sum of this column will tell me how many points are in the region. There's some other styling that I added to the graph that's in the example file. For example, I actually have 2 points commands. I'll go ahead and do an Option drag to clone the original one. And let's put one in the background that's going to use solid markers. Now you don't see it yet because this one's being drawn on top of it. So if you just want to test this out, depending on how I have them ordered is how the layers are drawn. So expand out this bottom one. And what we're going to do is now use the column that we created here to mask this data. So we're only going to draw the open points when the mask is equal to 0. That's what you see here. So now my other solid points can show through. And what I did in the example file is I also added a label, and I decided that for the label, I would just show the row number. That's why you have these numbers on these points. So that if you were interested in this point in particular, you'd see that this is row number 8. So I could go over here and see, yep, that's this data. Also, the points command, if you've never done this before, you can actually control-click on any point and say, select point in table. And, well, it was already selected, so maybe that wasn't too exciting. Let's try number 19 over here. Right-click, select point in table, and then it selects the point that you see there. Last thing I did is I added another fill into this one, so we can do that. And add in maybe a different color. If you add opacity, then you'll be able to see through the color. Oh, sorry if you can't see what I'm doing over here. And what I tend to do is, though, to then put the region at the top, because then that layer is drawn first, so you're not covering up your other points. And so this is coming together very well. You can see how I only see the labels for the ones that are outside of the region. The last thing here to add is this actual count that I did over here, this sum of the points in the region. I want this to be in my title. So I can just say points are equal to, and right here, this is where we're going to click to add a token, and it will show me a list of things available. Here's my sum mask. That's the variable that I created. Hit enter, and now I have my value being shown there. So if I move this around, the number of points that are being counted are going to change. And what I did in the example file also is just size up a bit the title so that you can see it a little bit better. You can do that by expanding your canvas settings. And right over here, there's a menu for the font where we can scale this up if you like, so you can see this a little bit better. But basically, there's the graph that we created. And again, if I change the size of this graph, it's not going to change what points are inside the region or outside the region, because that region is drawn in the units of data, not just a shape on top of my graph. We're in the home stretch. We have one more graph to make, and this is the one that we started with right at the beginning, where we have these two different data sets that are overlapping, and we're going to use the region command to highlight those two data sets. And let's go back now to the file that we've been working in. Here I've already added a new graph. We can start by adding the points for all of the bigger data set. And for this, what I did was actually, and I like this technique, to still use a filled or a point that has an outline and a fill. but we'll change the fill to be a dark color and the outline to be white. This makes it easier to differentiate between the points. Might be hard for you to see here, but hopefully when you're doing this at home, you can see this a little bit more clearly. Once we have this command, we can go ahead and actually just clone this, do an Option drag to create a second command that's exactly the same, but we're going to change the data for this. This is this data that I had in here. I haven't used this yet, my second group of data. One thing you could do, for example, is just you can click and drag and drop on the menus. I do this all the time to quickly populate my commands. And I'm going to change the color here, as well as let's use a different marker. So here, I think I used the squares. So now we have this background that we want to put the annotation on, and we're going to use the region command. Go ahead and add a region command. And one thing we haven't really talked about is the fact that you have these different shapes that you can use. This is under the type menu. We can have a rectangle. Actually, let me make this a little bit thicker to make sure this is showing up okay in the video. A rectangle. You have a rounded rectangle where you can change the radius here. You also have an ellipse, and that's the shape that I'm going to use now. Notice that these are all kind of bounded by the same square. So the ellipse exists within whatever the rectangle is. And for this region command, I haven't really, again, pointed too much of this out to you, but just so you can see, there's an X range and a Y range, and that range is defining the rectangle as you see here. And then these other shapes, when we change the type to something like ellipse, it is contained within that X and Y region. The ellipse also has a rotation that we can change. So if we want to move this over the points that we're interested in, we can just go ahead and drag it, maybe make that a little bit smaller. But here we have the points that we're interested in are now contained within this ellipse. And again, if I change my aspect ratio or change the size of this graph to an exact size for publication, those points are still going to be within that ellipse. Now I'm going to show you how to count them up. What we did before in the last graph is we added a mask for a single column, but the region command can accommodate as many commands as you would like that are on this graph. It can count up the points that are within the region. Also works for the plot command. We're not using that in this demo, but it will work for that as well. Points on the plot, on a plot command. So here we have the mask section where I can select one of the commands, and to add now a second command, go over here and you'll see how there's a little plus symbol that you can click. And when you do, you get another line, and we're going to select the second command that is within this graph. Again, simply adding these lines doesn't do anything. You have to extract the mask back out again. So let's move this mask actually closer to the data that it belongs with. Go ahead and put this up here. And the new masks that we're going to add, I want to add it within this second group. So I highlighted this column here on my column list, and now let's extract mask 1 and mask 2, and we'll just put these right inside of that group. I think in the example file I also have a column divider here. So now we have these two columns that they're giving us a 0 or a 1, telling us whether or not these points are within this region. All of the red points are in, but again, it's dynamic. So if I move it away, they're going to change from 1s to 0s. But now I want to show you how you can count these all up in one expression variable to get the total of how many points are within the region. So to do this, if you've never used an expression variable before, you create them over here on the where the variables are. There's an other drop-down menu. Select expression. That will add this object into your list of variables. And the expression variable actually has a gear menu that allows you to extract all sorts of things from other columns and other commands. So this is different than what we did with the prior graph where we made one variable that summed up everything in a column. Here we want to have, the expression variable is almost like a little built-in calculator. So I can add a number from column within this my little mini calculator here, and choose from the second group, the mask column, the first mask column. I'm going to add another number from column, and I'll choose from the second group mask 2. And from both of these, I'm doing the sum. That's what's shown here. There's other things that you could calculate. We'll just go ahead and use the sum. I have to give unique names to each of these variables within the expression variable. Again, think of it like a little mini calculator. And then the value line is where I'm going to say A plus B to give me a total. And there it is. There's my total of the number of points that are within my region. And we can just call this total. And go back over here now to my graph. And if you recall, in the example, there was a label here that also showed the total. And within the region command, there is a label option that you'll see right here. So I'm going to type in the word total equals to, and use the plus symbol next to this text box to select the total variable. Hit enter. And now you'll see that is on your graph. And if I want to make the text on that label a little bigger so I can see it a little bit better, I can do that like you see there. So now I have this very dynamic graph that if I, again, moved this around, it's going to change my total to reflect where that ellipse, what is actually contained within that ellipse. So we've done it. We've created all three of the graphs, and hopefully you have a sense for the fact that this is a much better technique than taking my graph and taking it into another program to add these annotations because of the dynamic nature of what I added here. Say, for example, I changed my original data set and I have less data or different data. Then notice that the totals in all of my graphs are changing as I update the number of points, making it a lot easier for me to have these graphs along with the annotations, not having to recreate that every time if I changed my data. With that, I hope that this was helpful. Please consider giving us a like and subscribe if it was. And we are planning some additional videos to show you some of the other things we have in 5.2. And until then, let us know if you have any questions.